Hello and welcome to the What's the Story podcast. I'm Jarlath Cowan.
And I'm Victoria Houston. Each week we'll be focusing on the stories that matter to you. Stories about the people and places that make Tyrone so special.
The What's the Story podcast is brought to you by the Northwest News Group, who also print our much-loved newspapers, the Ulster Herald, Strabane Chronicle and the Tyrone Herald. Enjoy the show. Thank you for listening. My name is Jarlath Cowan and joining me today is Don McGurgan, who's recently published the book Mourning Has Broken. It's a book that focuses on bereavement and it was inspired by Don's personal experiences following the passing of his late wife Marian in November of 2000. A native of Omagh, Don has worked in the electricity industry as a wayleave officer for over 40 years now, and he's also a successful sound engineer and local historian. However, his true passion lies in helping people. Having volunteered as a counsellor with Cruise Bereavement Support for over 10 years, he's aided numerous clients with the aid of his own experience in their personal grief journey and now counsels privately. It is these experiences which have ultimately inspired him to write the book in order to help others who feel that they don't have anyone to talk to in their time of need. Both a memoir and a guide, Mourning Has Broken seeks to dismantle the stigma surrounding grief and mental health and encourages readers to embrace their emotions and seek support during life's most challenging moments. Don, thank you for coming in today.
You're very welcome, Jarlath. That's a great introduction. That couldn't be that's me you're talking about, but
We'll start all the way back from 2000.
okay.
So just following the passing of Marian, obviously it was a very tough time for yourself.
Yeah, it was, and even we had sort of a long journey with her illness or her cancer journey. Even when the actual passing came, it's amazing just how unprepared you are. Part of the reason is we don't face it, and second reason is Marian and I took a decision that during her illness, we would not stare into an empty grave. We would live life as normally as we could, just to protect our children and protect life. And I think, life is only a day-to-day reality anyway. So, I mean, we just lived day to day. But then when she left, I had to start. Everything crumbled. I found myself a widower, and I never knew that fact. In fact, what did happen was that after her funeral, we went to the church hall as people do, had a cup of tea and sandwiches and met people, and there was a sort of a lull. But for about a fraction of a second, I looked around to see where she was to take her home, because she always would have headed off to another table and smoked to people and things. And that's when it really hit me that, my God, she's not coming back.
And from there then, I suppose, bridging the gap between that whole horrendous experience and then getting into counselling, that I'm sure then from there inspired you to write the book. So throughout those years, was there much time you were essentially, I'm sure, not for want of a better word, you're just getting on with it, keeping the head down? Or?
It was uncharted waters, and I looked for books. I couldn't find any books, either at that time, and then later on when I went to do counselling, I went looking for books as well. But no, what people tend to do, and what I did, and I'm not sure if this applies to everyone who's bereaved, but I put on a very stoic front that Marian had passed, and I held it together. But there was this other half of me that didn't want to face the fact that she was gone. Even in the very early days, and this sounds a bit crazy, I never locked the back door because I felt she might come back. Sometime that can happen. I know it sounds irrational to people listening who don't know what grief is like, but you can do that. You keep looking, you keep seeing. I've seen people who looked a bit like her. I nearly follow them around supermarkets. You do crazy things like that and you think you're losing your marbles. And you start to lose some sense of reality at times, and that's where it can get you. And that's why I'm a great believer in all in the book. I keep repeating myself, I think it sounds senile, but reach out to family and friends, because they are the people who will sustain you through these things. Oh, they may be very emotionally invested in you as a person and not able to talk to you, but it's very important that you reach out to them.
And so were you at a point where you reached out to family, or did you attend counselling then? Or?
I didn't, no. That to my regret. I had this mental image, Jarlath, that no one would have understood my pain. I thought my pain was unique to me. And you do that with grief. You think, well, no one's going to understand my journey, my story. Men especially do not reach out to people. It's a difficult thing for them. Difficult concept even to cry in front of people or to let people know your heart's broken. So I didn't, and that was probably, I paid a price for that, emotionally and physically and every other way, yeah. I was always a reader. I never read when I was at school. When I left school and started getting interested in reading, I always read biographies and a lot of self-help books, and I got into two authors like Wayne Dyer, and there was a writer, a lady psychologist from London called Dorothy Rowe. She would be very highly regarded therapist and psychologist who writes about healing and how we deal with pain and loss. And frankly, during Omagh, I had been reading one of her books called The Art of Happiness, Wanting Everything, and the bomb had gone off. And then during work, we weren't working. We were given time off just to do things at work because we couldn't process the grief what's going on here at the time. So I penned a letter to her because I knew by her book she would have been interested in why people hurt each other and various things. And I sent my letter over to her, just care of the publishers, thinking it would have disappeared into ether. But lo and behold, she wrote back to me within a week or 10 days saying that it was her wish to come to Omagh to see what had happened and hear what had happened for another book called Friends and Enemies. And would I assist her in this? And we booked her into the local hotel here, and we became very friendly. And we talked a lot, and it was her counselling me as just sitting having coffee in the evening and chatting and various things about loss and grief. And she said, you are a natural counsellor. There's people, she says, you can't train for these things. Sometimes just you get empathy with people. And she says, I think you really should study this. And that was the catalyst for me to get started in it. Then sometime after that, with a year or so, I applied for cruise and got accepted. And then I did the course, and I loved it because I lived fairly close to the hospital. I could have 1 or 2 or 3 patients a week. And that morphed into COVID, I suppose. When COVID came, then everything stopped. And yet there were clients who were suffering bereavement, all sorts of bereavement. And I set up a Zoom call from home. And one of the clients who was with me at that time was a Polish gentleman. So we had to bring an interpreter. And it was strange. The interpreter was getting more from this. And she was getting emotional about it because he was talking about his grief and I was trying to explain, he was in the middle and she was observing this. And I never questioned her what her grief was, but she was on a journey as well. And I thought to myself, there has to be a book out here, there's something here, just like a Northern Ireland book or a book locally about that. But there, as far as I could see, there wasn't. So I talked to Jonathan and Maria, my children, about it, and I said I could do this for clients. And I did that. I wrote chapters for them. And Jonathan says, that'll make a book sometime, if you want to do it. But I said, I can't discuss my clients. My clients are confidential. And that's one of the greatest things about counselling. What stays between two people stays there. So I says, I'm going to have to tell my story. And that was a huge effort for me to do that because I'm basically a private individual. I don't really discuss my private life with many people. So, and there I go put it in a book. But it's just life, and the passage of time now has allowed that as well, I suppose.
So in the book, your longtime friend, Father Brian Darcy, he describes in the foreword living with grief as learning to walk with a limp. So from there you had sort of found your feet. In finding your feet, then you were able to start writing the book.
Yeah. I think Dorothy Rowe's influence was that it doesn't matter what happens in life, it's your ability to deal with what happens. And I always start with my clients with the premise that if you can get to a stage where you can accept that you can't change what has happened. What has happened is you can't change that basic fact, but then you can start to make sense of it. And that's the problem with we can't make sense of it. We can't deal with that loss. We always hope. And there's Kubler-Ross, who's another well-known writer who writes about grief, and she talks about the stages of grief and various things. But I found her work very clinical. I'm more of a hands-on therapist. I have a very relaxed style with me. I do it often from my own kitchen. People come in for a cup of tea. We lock the door and have a chat. And it's a chat, and we talk about comedy. We talk about all sorts of things, but we do deal with the grief as well. Yeah. And that's that human connection, I think. And that's what I would... in a more sort of familiar, comfortable environment, as you said. The main part of this book is for people who have to deal with people who are grieving. And that's the problem. People don't know what to do or how to deal with it. There are keys in this book if you read for it and want to read it. This is a book that you can sort of pick chapters out.
That's what I was just looking at. So with the list of chapters, you've covered a lot in it. So the book contains, let me just check, you've 20 chapters altogether. So there's something for everyone, really, in terms of
that's it.
anyone that might be grieving or dealing with it.
Of course,
So,
that's it.
well, if we look through some of them here. So obviously it starts with Marian's story, just about her journey. Marian passed away in 2000 following a battle with cancer, was it?
Yeah, ovarian cancer, yes.
And then goes into coping with loss and the potential self-damage of not dealing with it. But throughout the book, there is a lot of fascinating chapters there. You're talking about, I'm just looking at some of them here, so obviously living one day at a time. The art of forgiveness.
That's a big thing with me, is forgiveness. And the forgiveness is not forgiving the perpetrator. Forgiveness is releasing the hold they have on you, the psychological hold they have on you. I say you're not forgiven. You don't have to forget. You forgive to let go so that you can rebuild. There are several chapters on forgiveness there because that's the main thing that people don't let go. And when you hold that premise, then there's always a power thing with you because they're thinking about you and you're thinking about them. When you get to the stage where you can say, I forgive, to release my pain, not particularly theirs. They're not in your journey anymore, and I say life will go on. You can rebuild your life without those painful people maybe in your life as well.
And another chapter that stands out now is chapter 14, simply entitled Religion. So in what way would things like religion work into grief?
Well, I suppose we live in a country where we're either perceived to be Roman Catholic or Protestant or nothing. So, and I have met people with all of those ideas. There's a just world thing in religion that people would have maybe inherited through their childhood, and they can say
they're set in their ways in a certain
pretty much set in their ways,
extent.
yeah. And people will say things like it's God's will, right? And you might say to yourself, well, how could a just God that I love and believe in let something dreadful happen in my life? And that then you realise then that, or I have learned from that God's will has really nothing to do with it. I'm not saying there's not a God or anything like that. What I'm saying is I believe God's love is unconditional love. And unconditional love is you can't move the chessboard on the table. You can bring your grief to Christ and God and tell him that you're dealing with it or how you're dealing with it and maybe find ways out of it. But I believe, and it's just a personal belief, that we are born with unconditional love anyway. Do you understand? It's not earned, it's given to us. And that's probably the part of the book that people don't like to talk too much about because it's their own personal feelings. Now, there are people then who don't have any religious beliefs at all, and they're fine. But it's been my experience, Jarlath, that over the years, those who don't profess a Christian belief are more Christ-like. Yeah. Because they want to leave the world a better place they found it. Yeah. They don't have any attachment to anything at all. They can give a life. They can have a life. But sometimes, just in their general expression, they're more forgiving of people. They're more open to life and the mystery of life.
And then moving on from the religion chapter, there is also a chapter 16, which focuses on faith.
Well, faith in yourself, I suppose, for want of a better word. The faith is that all adversity in life carries with it the seed of an equal or better opportunity. That's a tough thing to realise because it puts you back in the driving seat. If you think of it again, all adversity, anything that can happen in your life carries with it the potential of an equal or better result. My God, that's tough because you can't blame people then. You got to say to yourself, when will this ever come back to me that I'm as good as I was prior to the bereavement? And that's the journey of life, and that's what the journey of this book's about. So
this time of year as well, Christmas, it's tough for a lot of people in terms of grief and bereavement and that. So what sort of message would you put out just to anybody that might be struggling at this time of the year that may have recently lost a loved one or maybe is still struggling with?
Yeah. I imagine, and it's more than an imagination, that those who lost people during COVID, third, fourth year in, is a tough time because they're no longer the centre of the conversations in their families, but yet you may be feeling their loss more so the fact that you were robbed of a public wake or a public funeral or public grieving, and your friends weren't there with you. They have all sort of gone back to their families now, and this is probably the toughest year for people who lost 2-3 years ago. And I say to them, well, you know, all you can do is really think about the joy that those people brought in your life when they were here. And this sounds a bit weird to talk to somebody about this, but in counselling, what I would do is I almost use bring a spare chair into a table like this, and I say to them, look, I'm going to change this conversation. This conversation is going to be now about, imagine you're the one who has, in the non-physical, has gone, and the person that you're grieving about is talking to me about you. What would your message be to them? And invariably they'll all say, oh, I just wish they could rebuild their lives in meaningful ways, or get on with their life and do what they wanted to do and have those holidays that we didn't get and various things. So I put it back to them. That's you speaking from the non-physical. So the person you have lost in the non-physical is saying exactly the same to you. And this is what I'm saying here this morning to you, is that people who are no longer with us are still very much with us. We don't die. There's no death, and that's it's more than memories. I think I don't use the word death. I say non-physical, because we go. I believe we come here for a journey. I think if you thought about it, I suppose, and this is deep stuff. Earth is the only place where you could have contrast. Yeah. Do you understand? If you live in a place where there's no time, no reality, and you're aware, well, then this is the only place where you can suffer, enjoy, grow, and everything else. So maybe this is what this is part of our evolution is about, really.
Don, just when it came to writing the book now, considering it covers a lot, there's a lot covered in the book, so where did you even start, really? Obviously with chapter 1 was Marian's story, so that's something very personal to you, but in terms of what you wanted to cover in the book, I mean, was it a journey to kind of sit down and try and arrange that, or was it something where you just were writing and working away and it sort of came together naturally?
Well, with my son Jonathan would have done most of the sort of editing for me, and John McCusker as well came in to help us with it. I just wrote copious amounts of words, just pretty much, and we sort of tried to make chapters out of it and as best we could. The problem was keeping a book that people can carry around. It's not a heavy book, it's not a big book, but it's got 60,000 words in it. I made the best that I could of that, and I put a 4 or 5 pages in the back for people to maybe encourage them to write their own journey, because I love people to write about their lives. If you come to me for anything, I'll be giving you a book. Come with you to write. It
can be beneficial too.
For anything in life.
It's therapeutic for a lot of people.
Absolutely. I mean, write about it. And I, as you know, I'm interested in oral history, and I recorded people with lives and who have lived long lives in this town. And the strange thing is, when we finish up the interview and we have a chat off mic, I've often said to them, what would you do again if you could live it all about? And they've all said, oh my God, I wish I didn't worry. I just wish I spent more time with family and friends. I wish I just didn't take things so seriously and stuff like that. And that's what this book is about, I suppose, is my interpretation that life, tragic as it is, and I would often say to clients, the person that you've lost, if you burden them with the responsibility of your happiness, then you give them a burden that they don't deserve. Everyone's happiness is an inside job. It belongs to you, and it was never a person's job to make you happy. Now, it's lovely to find love in life and connection with people, certainly, but our core value is our own value, is what we believe in life to be the most important part. Therefore, if you can embrace all the new relationships, you can move on. Your story doesn't end. And as Brian Darcy said, that you're like walking with a limp, or some people describe it as a bird that can't fly just with one wing. But those are concepts, but they're not necessarily the way it should be. I have rebuilt my life again without Marian. Okay, she's missed in every day of her life. She's missed, but she does not occupy a place, the point where I can't live and enjoy life. And that's a choice that I had to make. Now, I could sit, and there's plenty of people who do sit and grieve forever, and that's their choice, and I don't say you should or shouldn't do that. I say in the book, you never get your grief story wrong.
as the title of chapter 12 says there, it's death, the end, or a new beginning.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
that's
yes,
about
yes,
it.
pretty much, yeah. But there's a chapter in this about dogs.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I see losing a pet as
Yes,
well.
yeah,
So
yeah.
obviously that was one of my first. I remember losing my childhood dog as a young kid,
Yes,
and
yes.
devastating.
Of course it is, yeah.
I think I was 12, and I mean, you don't even you don't expect something like that to hit
No.
so hard.
No. But I mean, our animals we have great connection with animals, and great empathy with our animals and stuff, and they give us unconditional love. And a lot of times is that people don't realise, sometimes it's just you and your dog or your cat or whatever it is, stare alone into the abyss at night when you can't sleep. And then when this animal's gone, people say wonderful things, it's just a dog, you'll get over it, But they don't know that connection that you had. It's a connection that's broken. Sometimes people can say to people, have said to me in the past, when the dog died, something worse, that was worse than maybe losing a neighbour or a friend or something else that happened. And that's because we get great connection. The dogs give us totally unconditional love, and we can transfer that love onto our animals.
And you're maybe one of the only people they have, obviously, or any sort of connection with.
Well, when everybody else goes, your dog stays.
That's it.
I have, my Marian had a dog, a wee Yorkshire Terrier, and he lived 7-8 years after she passed. Now, he became my. Dogs are smart enough that he was doted on her, and when she passed, I took over the role, and the day I took him to the vet to get him put to sleep, he had lost his, he couldn't really walk, and I took him home in the back of the car, and I thought to myself, there ends another connection to my wife.
Yeah.
Gone. That was probably the last connection of living thing that she really loved. And and that's why it's in the book. It's a chapter there, and it's a chapter that people will read, and I hope we'll get something from.
The fact that it intertwines personally with us, not just about losing the pet, as you says.
Yes.
There was that last connection
It's lost a connection.
Marian for you personally.
Yes, exactly.
So, Dawn, you're going to read an extract from the chapter about losing a pet then.
Yeah, because this is probably will resonate with a lot of people, especially around Christmas time, if you've lost a pet or trying to maybe decide to bring another pet into the family and stuff. So I'll read it as best I can without my glasses here. There's a cycle of love and death that shapes the lives of those who choose to travel in the company of animals. It's a journey unlike any other. To those who have never lived through its turnings or walked its rocky path, or willingness to give our hearts with the full knowledge that they will be broken seems incomprehensible. Only we know how small a price we pay for what we receive. Our grief, no matter how powerful it may be, is insufficient in the measure of joy we have been given by our pets. When your dog dies, they tell you not to cry. It's just a dog, not a human being. Get over it. What are people going to think? Dry your eyes. They tell you your dog was no longer in pain, and you should be glad of that. They might say that you wished you had someone who loved them enough would take them to a place to be put to sleep when they come to the end of their useful life. They tell you that it's important to not let them suffer. They will say it was for their own good. They tell you there was no more pain, but they don't know how many times you and your dog have looked into the darkness alone when human friends were nowhere to be found. They don't know how many times your dog was the only one who was there by your side when others walked away. They don't know how much you fear at night when you wake up with your grief. They don't know how many times your dog slept near you. They don't know how much you have changed since your dog became part of your life. They don't know how many times you hugged your dog when he was sick. They don't know how many times you acted like you didn't see him or her getting older and unable to express their puppy-like traits. They don't know how many times you've talked to your dog, the only one who ever really hears without judgment. They don't know just how it was you and your dog knew you were in pain. They don't know what it feels like to see your dog trying to say hello. They don't know, They don't know when things went wrong, the only one who didn't leave was your dog. They don't know that your dog trusts you in every moment of its life, even in the last. They don't know how much your dog loved you and how much it was enough for him to be happy just to be loved by you. They don't know that crying for a dog is one of the most noble, significant and true and warmest things you can do. They don't know... I'm going to stop it again. They don't know that crying for a dog is one of the most noble and significant, true and warmest things you can do. They don't know when the last time you moved him, how much pain he was in, making sure you didn't hurt him. They don't know what it felt like to pet their face in the last moments of their life. Not everyone gets to experience the purity and spirit of the ability to love unconditionally. Our pets are much more than aware of their inner being than we humans give them credit for. Our animals, simply by observing their human owners, offer no resistance and love unconditionally. They give nothing but pure positive energy, showering us with love and special connection. Our pets do not hold grudges or replay past scenarios over again. Once an uncomfortable situation passes, they let it go completely. If you find yourself wondering what to say to someone who has lost their pet, try to understand that it's not just the pet, it's the loss of connection. That connection can never be replaced by a new pet. And allow the person time to grieve. You don't have to try to make connection or make someone feel better. Often just your presence is sufficient for them to understand that you're in deep pain.
Powerful stuff. There's another chapter, Dawn, just a scene there with, it's entitled Impossible Situations.
Yes.
So in terms of grief and bereavement, what would those impossible situations be that people may find themselves in?
Well,
is it just
your
own thought process?
Well, there's that, and there's the people who want you to recover from your grief as much for their benefit, because they don't want to see you in pain or crying or whatever it is. So sometimes you can get yourself in a situation whereby you will be stoic in front of them. All right, you'll have a face, a persona, and all the rest. But then when you come and close the door at night and sit down, your world just literally falls apart again. And then because you've handled the grief and the funeral and wake and the whole procedure so well, people say, "Oh, you've done so well." You've got these sort of this sort of persona now that you are coping.
Yeah.
And then reality, you're not.
Behind it all, you're just putting up that front.
That's exactly it, and that's why that's why Crews are a wonderful organisation. But I'm trying to almost develop a situation, almost like AA. You know how AA people meet, nobody knows to meet, they just meet, and there's a group, and it happens.
Yeah.
I think bereavement could do the same. I think the original founders of Crews were women who were widowed, who just came along to support each other.
Yeah.
And this is a book about how you could do that if you want to. You don't have to be in bereavement counselling for weeks. I have clients for two visits, and they were fine. And sometimes, I had one gentleman with me who listened to me, or I listened to him, I should say, sorry, for about 35, 40 minutes. He just sat and talked, and he thought it was gibberish. He thought he was losing his marbles. And I just said to him, "What you've told me makes absolute perfect sense." And I could see almost like a light bulb coming on in his face. He says, "Am I not losing my marbles?" I said, "Absolutely not. It's just your grief, and it's how you're processing it." And next week later, we were finished. You come in, and how I know we were finished is you get cues from people who what they say and what they don't talk about. And I knew he had finally made sense to him. His grief was just something that he had thought. The poor man thought he was next door to needing psychiatric help and stuff. But it's just grief and loss can do those things. You can lose your way. It's like, you can find yourself in your own house. Sometimes if there's a power failure, a house you walk around all your life and know every inch of, but in the middle of the night, something goes off, there's no power. You can't find the bedroom door or something like that. We can lose our direction. Grief's not dissimilar.
So are you still volunteering with Crews?
No, I left Crews. Actually, I left Crews just short after COVID. And what I do now is that I suppose I get referrals. People who I would have dealt with would ask me to come and talk to them or come and see me. So I run a sort of like a private sessions at home with me on a one-to-one basis, yeah.
And if anyone was struggling, would you advise them to reach out to the likes of Crews or yourself even?
Yes, yeah. I would say so, yeah. I mean, don't be afraid to say to people. And sometimes, as I say, your nearest and dearest are... It's a bit like when you talk to family and friends. I'm not sure if you try to teach your child to drive a car, you can't do it because you're so emotionally invested in their safety and their worry. And you say every corner they go around, you say, "Watch that car." You're not the right person to teach it. It needs the job of someone who's not that. Who's got the skills to do that.
Or if you're like me, you'll hit your dad's car into a pothole and get in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, this is it. And that's what happens, you see. And I say to people, sometimes you can talk to, you know yourself. I've been on airplanes or buses and I've talked to people and I've confided in them and shared things with them. Sometimes a stranger can, because there's a certain safety that they're not going to be a part of your life when this is over either. It's not a permanent relationship. So you can have a good conversation with a stranger, yeah, if you trust them.
So just wrapping up, Don, now, if anybody is interested in getting a copy of Mourning Has Broken, where is it available from?
Well, for Omagh, around the Omagh district, it's in Top News in Georgia Street.
Thank you very much for joining me, Don.
You're very welcome indeed. Thanks very much.